All right, welcome back, everybody. We have a very, very special guest, one of the smartest guys I know, and very humble. So you can't tell him that. He's not going to admit that. He's going to say, no. But definitely knows a lot more about Wireshark than I do. And they've been seeing me play with Wireshark. So let's just start with that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're lucky because I actually took Larry's class and got my CISSP and CCSP right from
No, that's right. You took my classes.
attending both classes. So you're in good hands with Larry. And as Larry said, I've known Larry a long time. In fact, when I took your class back in 2005, I think I just was either going or coming back from Shark Fest. I think the first
Right.
one.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That was 2008.
No.
You were going because it was 2008 and I couldn't go. I had my own conference and there's a video to prove it. So I'll show that.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. That sounds about right. So yeah, hi everyone. As Larry mentioned, I'm Kevin Boland. I work for Amazon Web Services as a senior security solutions architect, which is just really to say that I do a lot of security in the cloud and primarily work with the largest telecoms. Although I do some healthcare and life sciences and just general some of the largest customers around the globe. So with that, I have a PowerPoint that I was just going to run through. Kind of talks about governance, right? So a lot of the CISSP is all about reducing risk, about cloud security. I do see, even though I work for AWS, I've been working in the cloud for a long time, even at my previous company since around 2009, 2010. And we do see this shift of moving to the cloud, as again, even with telecoms. So we're going to talk about that. And then in the last year or so, one thing that we see a major push for, and I'm sure everyone has heard about, is generative AI. So I also incorporated some Gen AI and then how to secure that also in the context of the cloud, but just general Gen AI. If that sounds good, like a good agenda. All right. Yep. All right. So this will be the hardest part because I don't use Zoom all the time. So I'll just have to let me share my screen and make sure I can. All right. So found it. Um, so my co-host Larry, because it says who can share. It says host all participants.
Yeah, you should be able to see. Yeah.
Um, okay, yep.
Great.
Let me just find my screen. It should be good.
Yeah, don't bring it up with your mail that I tend to do. My mail open, and then I
No,
go, let me share my screen.
I can actually. I'll just go to my second. Let me just put this in. Actually, let me put this in view, and then.
Like Charlotte, he knows my wife. Char always teases me for not having two monitors. She has three because she's also got her stock tickers going up.
Yeah, I have three, but I have two active. So let me do this. Okay, so gave that screen. All right. Yep, this works. Let me move the Zoom over, and I'll just share my main screen. Just let me know if you can when you can see it.
I see it now. Yep,
Okay. Let
great.
me move some of the
This is
Zoom
what
stuff.
I should be doing.
Oh,
This is
whoops. Well, yeah, it's kind of weird. I usually have the two reverse screens, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so as I mentioned, work for AWS, deal with security, identity, compliance. They kind of all tie together, and I'll kind of go through each of them in the context of the cloud. But really, what we're looking at, whether it's on premises, the cloud, hybrid, etc., is really trying to reduce the overall risk. So here, right, on premises security traditionally challenging. What we hear from our customer is really the lack of visibility. So different things are put into different data centers. There's a low degree of automation. So that changes a little bit when you use like virtual machines or VMware. But just in general, trying to script things out, whether you're using like PowerShell or Bash scripts, any kind of that automation. So before it was either move fast or stay secure. A lot of times they said, right, security is the office of no. And we really want to try to change that mindset to say you can now move fast, but then also stay secure. And security in general is not a hindrance. And so, in the context of cloud, that's different than, I'll say, traditional on premises, is really what we call the shared responsibility model. And you probably have heard of this if you have done anything in the cloud or worked with any of the cloud providers. And what we mean by this is you have security in the cloud, and as customers, this is the responsibility to determine, what AWS services or any cloud services that a customer selects. And so that can mean what encryption you have in place, what kind of tooling you have in place. Even if you think about it as the virtual machine itself, any cloud provider is not going to secure the context within the VM itself, right? We call them instances. So within the instance, are you making sure it's patched, as an example? The cloud providers are not going to be able to have that insight into your VM. That is your responsibility as a customer. So the same thing would apply as on premises as it does in the cloud, as far as having the vulnerability management, patch management, etc. But then you have, by using cloud service providers, security of the cloud. And that is the cloud provider provided protection for the infrastructure that runs all the cloud. So, as an example, you have what we call availability zones, and you can think of them as data centers. So, to secure the data center itself, make sure that the right protections are in place, like fire alarms, right, sprinklers, etc., that things can fail over between different availability zones. Again, you can think of them like a data center. That the cloud providers are provided network connectivity, that there are multiple regions to maybe say do DR. And so that's the responsibility of the cloud. That is abstracted from the customer. So again, if you think of a traditional on-prem data center, that's where I started off with, and the servers were in the building itself. You had to make sure that you had the physical security, that right, the servers themselves were protected, etc. So that is of the cloud. That is now being moved to the cloud provider, and anything that you use as far as services, what encryption is in place, what is encrypted, anything with virtual machines or containers is in security in the cloud. So that's the responsibility of the customer. So as we look at that, you have infrastructure and services that elevate your security. We'll go more into, I'll go in more into the inherent global security and compliance controls. That's also important as you take the CISSP, because what you'll learn about is like ISO, and there are inherent global controls that are of the cloud, but you as a customer will have to have that in the cloud. And I've gone through, as an example, like a SOC 2 compliance. At my previous job, I did an ISO 27001. So I've been through all those types of compliance. FedRAMP, I went through, which is really involved, but we'll talk more about those. You can scale, so you have what I'll call superior visibility and control. So you can tag objects. You could also, in the cloud, look at all of your inventory. So, right, you think about asset management, and you can see anything that's not tagged or doesn't have like a business owner, and you can put meta tags on that. That's super important. I always say, if you can't protect what you don't know, so having that assets within your environment, knowing what you have so that you can protect it, that you don't have a rogue server out there that is out there, maybe not patched, then it has a vulnerability. things of
It's
that
actually
nature.
one of my
Yeah,
wife's pet peeves, actually, and you know my wife, is
yeah,
that she finds
yeah,
out that people, in her environment, she's got a lot of scientists spinning up servers and
yeah,
R&D, and they're not patched. And what she could do is just say it's not our responsibility. We're keeping them in a separate thing, but that's one of her biggest challenges, and it makes them miss, like, even if it's just a report, someone will come in, the third party does an assessment report, and it just shows up as reds.
yeah. I mean that's a really good point. I happen to deal with like scientists when I deal in the healthcare side, and the scientists they're not security minded like everyone on this call would be, right? Obviously, you're here for your site CISSP, but to the end user, they just want to spin up something, have that functionality, and they don't necessarily care about the security. They'll
Not
leave
only
it
don't
run.
they care,
Yeah,
they're also, unlike regular users, they're very, very smart, and they figured out how you've got this endpoint detection and so on, and they're just going to disable it. So get
yeah,
alerts that a CrowdStrike endpoint what stopped. Now, was that an attacker or was it a crafty sign? Because they stay up at 3 o'clock in the morning too, and she's got to
yeah.
troubleshoot those.
Yes, yeah, especially when you think like a global landscape, which I have seen that. I'll just give you a quick real world example where you could only spin up resources from X amount of time. That's the flexibility in the cloud. And but you do have right scientists that maybe have a thought at 2 in the morning. To your point, Larry, they try to spin up something, and you can actually put that governance to say no one in this region should be spinning things up because it's off work hours. I mean, you can have that control, or you can at least have it alert and say this did get spun up. So there's what we call preventative controls, but then also detective controls. Preventative would mean that scientists can try to spin something up and it just won't launch because it's not within X amount of criteria. Like think of we call them conditions statements. So only spin up from I'm making this up at 8 a.m. to like 5 p.m. Anything else they don't spin up. Or you can say you can spin it up, but send me a detective control to your security team, and they can say, you know, why is Larry spinning up a server or servers at 2 a.m. Maybe right, you had some kind of thought you wanted to experiment.
Uh,
So that is all possible within the cloud, and
And
I
then
have
it's up to the
customers that do it
customer,
daily.
and then it's up to the customer to decide what policy works best for them, but you provide the tools regardless.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, you definitely have that flexibility again. Like you can put what we call preventative control or detective control, kind of dependent on the business use case.
All right, may I
There's
go
also
there?
yeah,
Wait, can
yeah,
I go there? Prevent, detect, and then the last part is always response. So like an
yeah,
IPS type of thing, can you set up where it's detective, but if it goes beyond a certain threshold, some AI just might go, no, this isn't a scientist.
yeah, correct. We call it anomaly. So
Right.
if there's anomaly, or you could put like limits. So I'll just use the same example where a scientist spins up a server, but if they spin up 100 servers,
There you
that
go.
would be like, well,
Something like that.
there,
Something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
like there's no reason anyone should be spinning up 100 servers. There's also different things you can do at like cost because it costs money. So
So in which
every
case, it's actually not just prevention or detection. You actually have prevention, detection, and response. You have all three
yeah,
processes in there, and that's our three goals, right,
yeah,
guys? We always want to prevent, detect, and respond. Thanks.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, and it's audit. To your point, there is some AI in there today, but even we call it config if you're using AWS, where you can have automated response or you can send it to the SOC. So it can be like a human. You could also have it automate and shut down services,
If I can
and
interject,
automate it.
because I know you love AI, so actually, my class already has been we've been using to a lesser degree Claude, my friend, because Claude's quite limited compared to Bard and Chat. But
Yeah,
when Amazon made the announcement, you and I were on the phone or texting back and forth when you
yeah,
told me, dude, you got to get Claude, and
yeah,
I'm all over the AI. Is being used by attackers, and we need to use it as defenders. And so I'm telling my students to that point of response versus just detection. A SIM tool would be like an aggregated all of your detection things and helping you correlate it. SOAR systems are the
yeah,
way to automate, but most people I know, and you'd be a great guy to ask, in that source system, are you noticing that the AIs are like not aligned right? So you don't want to automate the playbooks so far haven't gone into production. We're getting ready. We know it's coming, but I don't know that the AI generated automated response isn't going to accidentally, you know, do the wrong thing.
Yeah, I mean that comes up all the time. So we do have right the sword. It's typically in test, and the biggest reason for that is that level of automation people are not comfortable with. I don't think it's quite there yet. And what I mean by that is it still needs human supervision. So you can spin up a lot of things with Store with AI, but to have that actually go in production, you don't want it to deny a legitimate use case is really the main thing
Sure.
there.
And the way
And
I tell my students, it's kind of like airplanes in the early days. Don't put your until these guys figure out these flying contraptions or the car, you might want to stay in your horse and buggy. But by 2029, I think we are going to have it. They're going to be very ready to go. So I think the whole 5 year mission is just getting ready for that. Yeah.
yeah, there's a good link that are so I work from the office of the CISO. I'm the sister organization. But just yesterday, I think, or the day before, our CISO had did an interview in the Wall Street Journal with a bunch of AI. So I'll send that to you, Larry. You can feel free to share it with your class. And it talks about exactly what the topic we were just talking about, where you have AI that does all these great things, but then you have that human element that aligns. So, in fact, if you have the Wall Street Journal, maybe you read it. It was like yesterday, the day before. But I'll send it to you. I think it's a good read on that very topic.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yep.
Go back to your regularly scheduled program. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, no. Yeah. And feel free to, if anyone has questions, I mean, I'm running through this just to make sure I hit on all the topics, but feel free to ask questions or we can dive deeper into any of these
All right,
topics.
Kevin, I have a question. Thanks
Sure.
for coming on board. I'm trying to time it like if you have a multi-tenant customer,
Yep.
how do you dimension your maybe let's say like you have different how do I put it now? Like a customer decide to have different UTM solutions for
Yep.
his infrastructure. Like how do you dimension it from AWS standpoint? How do you dimension the services you're giving the customer from a multi-tenancy standpoint?
When you say multi-tenant, do you like mean multi-cloud or just like different accounts within?
Different different accounts, different accounts.
Yeah. So typically it kind of will depend on the customer, but the customers I deal with are the biggest customers that AWS deals, right?
Like
So
let me just not see if I don't want to do like non-disclosure, but I have an ISP customer now. They provision various UTM solutions for different clients, but now
yeah.
they now have an AWS infrastructure. But I'm thinking like, how do you now provision what service you're giving to each customer from? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so like they have individual customers. So before I worked at AWS, I ran a global managed service provider. And so the best way to do that, if you have this customer and they have different services that you want them to use and maybe some that you don't want to use, the easiest is you provision them account. You have a central security account that does your overall governance. So that could do things like audit logs, any kind of security tooling. That's the main security account. And then each individual account gets provisioned, per company. And what you could, in the case, and I don't know what the other clouds are, but we call them service control policies. So they're called SCPs.
Mhm.
And within an SCP, you can say, you can either do a deny or an allow. So you can say, only allow they can use EC2 instance, they can use EBS volumes, which are storage, maybe config. So you can actually explicitly say what they're allowed to use, or you could say you could use everything, but you can deny certain different services. And then you attach that FTP either to an organizational unit if you created that, or just to the account itself. That there are options.
Okay.
And then you still have that central security account that logs everything. That way, that part is keeping you in compliance.
Um, like the policy you talked about, is it like a generic policy or is it custom built? Because I have customers that actually want, like they want to do AV, they want antivirus, some want DLP, some want web filtering. Like, how do you now marry them together if you have an AWS infrastructure? That's where the confusion comes in.
Yeah, so their SCPs, right? Service control policies are specific because you have to say what you want to allow or deny. Now, if you have a bunch of customers and they're similar, right, in nature, you can take that SCP and apply it to an organizational unit, and then you can put all the accounts within an organizational unit. And then you maybe, if they're allowed like another service, you do have to customize, right? You have to allow that SCP per account. As far as like a web filter, that's another service. So in our case, it's, we call it AWS WAF, so it's a web application firewall,
Okay.
and they have their own policy. So that's also going to depend on the workload, and you can think of a workload like a customer account. And so I'll give you a good example. If that customer is only using layer 7, like HTTPS traffic,
Mhm.
that WAF would only, let's say, have the OWASP top 10, web injection.
Mhm.
But if you had another account that used TCP, right, some other form of web traffic, there's also managed rules and policies for web traffic that you could apply to another account that uses different traffic that's coming in. And there are managed rules that you don't have to customize. To your question, right? Do you have to customize? You can do that. You can certainly do that. That's an option. But we also provide managed rules for a WAF that would allow you just to enable them, and then you would inherit that. So we would use things that are pretty much industry standard, like OWASP top 10, it would block. So it kind of depends. I mean, for everything you're asking for, like DLP, we have backups.
If I can
Yeah.
interject, I think what you're both alluding to, there's an ISO Federation term for, and they're called nominative frameworks. So you would
Yeah.
set an organization nominative framework, an ONF, one ONF for the entire organization. And then if everybody else defaults to that, but let's say in one branch office or one sub organization, they have different requirements. Then you would create a special ANF, an application normative for this particular app. So it's always a one ONF for everybody, but you might have multiple ANFs depending on your requirements. Is it something like that?
Yeah, you can certainly do that. The other thing is, like, if you align to again, these are, like, I won't get too much into too many specific services, but we also have compliance. So if you're talking about like NIST 853, you can enable that framework on a service called, we call it Security Hub, that will align all to the 853 and make sure that you're in compliance. To your point, Larry, and then you can tweak it as you want. So, and we have that out of the box where you enable it, and then it will say where you're in compliance for that whole framework.
I'm writing in the text, and possibly many ANFs for separate organizations, for sub-organizations, we call them.
Yeah.
So that's, I put it to everyone in the meeting. Why would I send it to other people? So that's what we're looking for there. It sounds like the terminology, and basically the answer is yes, you can do that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you can create a hierarchy. Like if you think of Active Directory, like an OU, different accounts. You can start at the top and then get more granular as you go down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
trying to use
absolutely.
an example organization for my classes. I was asking Bard. I love Bard. He's so wild and woolly. And I said, I want something that shows a large enterprise that seems like why is it to be the Bureau of Tobacco and Firearms? Why are they the same thing? And actually, and it was, but one of my cousins was the National Institute of Health, and I remember it was 29 sub organizations, but they finally consolidated to like 26. So that's a
Yeah,
perfect
yeah,
example that the National Institute of Health is going to have. I don't care who you are. Now, if you happen to be whatever breast cancer research, then you need special requirements, we can do that. Make sure you document that, and so we can feed that in and make sure these are policy requirements. And then you
yeah.
find technologies that support those, or architectures, I should say, whatever, that support those policies. And you do. You're very granular. You can do that.
Yeah, and it's super important, even those right when you're starting off in the cloud, is to build your organizational structure. That's a big part of my job when I work with companies. I work with companies that have broken off from larger organizations, and it's getting that account structure right from the beginning. It is harder to go back, so it is a super important topic to kind of know your business requirements, where the workloads will go, and to go into different
Well, one of my favorite things
applications.
you brought up, and it's, I'm sorry, again, I don't mean to, but I think it's very testable. You said at the organizational level, you said things like logging. That is
Yeah,
absolutely key important for compliance because at a high level, that's who they're going to call upon. And they don't want to go down, well, I don't know, are you compliant? Are you compliant? Are you compliant? So
right.
all of that logging, it is common knowledge. That's when the third line of assurance. So the first line is the guys who do stuff, and then there's their managers, the second line. But the third parties that come in and assess that, they want to see those logs at a high level. And so the way NIST is rolling it out, that would go to a chief risk officer who's a direct report at the highest level. And then each of
Yeah,
us, if we work at whatever breast cancer research or whatever, then we would have our own stuff that we maintain, but always filter our logs to go to that central logging mechanism. It's
yeah,
very key.
yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned in a previous life, we went through the ISO 27001 the first time, and then I was there a long time. So I think two others, actually, right by you, Larry. You know what I'm talking about. And so we did get audited, and they looked at the controls, also change management, what changed, and then if we had tickets. So it was easy because we were in AWS, and it was easy to pull that compliance report and say, here's what changed, here's the log, link them together, and achieve that certification.
Thank you, Obi, for asking such a very testable concept. I felt on the one hand
Yeah,
it was selfish because must have that business, you're in that situation, but it's actually led to a lot of great stuff. Thank you.
yeah, yeah, definitely. It's a really good question because that organization, it is important to make sure you have that correctly, and then um, also have that central right security for the audits and so forth. Um, so yeah, good question. All
Hello,
right, so
Kevin.
yes,
Sorry, I'm Lewis. So I know
hello.
Larry, good instructor. Um,
Yeah,
Cloud
absolutely.
security is something which I'm quite interested, not just for my own interest. In addition, the type of customers uh, have a mixture of large enterprise Cisco networks, and Cisco have got their own cloud, and then there's also AWS, Azure, and Google.
Yep.
Now, how do the whole thing line up in terms of security? Do you all follow any security architecture, or do you all comply to any standards? Because when a customer comes and says, how can I trust the cloud? I trust my own network. Well, at least he trusts his own network. He's got good monitoring tools. He's got a good logging mechanism. But then when I go to the cloud, I know
Can
it's a
I
shared
interject
risk.
on you, Lewis?
Sorry?
Can I interject with? I want you to think about you. It's almost like going to the auto rental, and you want to rent
Oh,
a
okay,
car,
fine.
right?
Sorry. Okay.
No, no, no. So if you want to trust, it's like I trust my car, or I trust my family with my car. But let's say I'm renting cars, and
Yeah,
I want to trust you with my car. What do I check? Or it could be the reverse. I want to trust the Uber driver. What
right.
do you look for? You look for a driver's license, right? A certificate. And
Right.
Kevin already mentioned he's got the ISO 27001 certificate.
Okay.
So, and that is very testable, Lewis. So your
Right.
question, that is going to be a question on the exam. How can you trust that cloud provider? And it's through a third-party assurance, but more likely, Kevin mentioned something else that is going to be very testable, and people get a dozen questions on it, Lewis, so it's a fantastic question. You're
Okay.
going to look, if they're a cloud provider, to see if they had an SSAE 18 audit, not 16 or SAS 70. Those are the old ones. And they're going to produce, they're going to say, what? Well, yes, we did have the audit. You're looking for what? The confidentiality stuff, our security controls? Well, you can read it on our website. You can go to the SOC 3 report. But if you really need more detail because you want to be a customer of ours, sign this NDA and we'll give you the SOC 2. And look, he's got it right up. So here's the answer to your question.
Thank you. I
Yes,
think
he was
Yeah,
ready for you.
I jumped ahead 2 slides,
No,
but
you
yeah,
got
that's
it.
actually important.
This is
Yeah.
exactly why. So it's like, but he's got a driver's license not only in PA, he's got a driver's license that, well, if you have a 27001, you're allowed to drive anywhere in the world overall. But that doesn't mean you're allowed to drive for special government in the US government. So I saw the FedRAMP cert. Highlight that, can you? Because that's very testable.
Yeah,
Right.
right
So
here.
if you're going to handle whatever controlled unclassified information, I don't want to just see your SOC 2 report. You got another test, and the ISC square knows it. You're going to take I want to see your FedRAMP. And you said something about it being a pain in the ass, didn't you?
Yeah, so I actually come from, I worked at the Pentagon and the NSA, right, Department of Defense, and as a contractor before the cloud, right, early on, like on premise. Then I worked for a software company where we actually did managed service, and we went through ISO, SOC 2, SOC 3, and then FedRAMP. FedRAMP is by far, in my experience, the hardest, but also the more controls, more for good reason, right? So it's kind of like the highest, or one of them, as far as taking government and secret, right, type of workloads into the cloud. So we do have, federal. These are just some of them, by the way.
Wait a minute.
But
Pause. Are you allowed? I
yeah.
didn't know that was so. That was. I wasn't. I didn't want to make that statement. I only said controlled unclassified, but you can go as high as secret.
Well, yeah, we have what we call Gov Cloud, right? So in Gov Cloud, and you can look it up, like as far as like the different controls, but
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
secured workload.
Can
Now
you go as high
there
as
are
TS? Can you do
restrictions.
TS? Can you do TS? Are you on CIFR yet?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't deal with the federal side too much now, but
Okay, but as far as
that's
you know,
yes.
they can hit
But
secret level.
yeah, so you could look up the compliance. These are just some of the compliance, by the way. I'll send the link where you could look up specific, but yeah, if it's FedRAMP, but there is GovCloud, and there's obviously restrictions with GovCloud, like clearances to actually even use it, U.S. citizens, etc.
Hey,
But
we have a question here, and it's very, very testable too. So I don't mean to interject. Some people
okay,
get a dozen questions on GDPR. GDPR is a law. You don't get certified
yes,
in the
correct,
GDPR certified. That's the law.
yeah,
Now,
correct,
having a 27001 report is probably some of the best assurance an American company could provide. If you were in
correct,
Europe, you might not need to go to that level. You can get a local European that costs less money, but we're not in Europe. So you got to spend something that's internationally recognized. I can't get a whatever. If you would, it's like saying if I had a British driver's license, that would count. But since I don't, I need a passport. So the ISO is like having an international passport.
correct. So that's correct. It's very testable. So GDPR, I remember, definitely came up on my test. It's been a little bit now, but that definitely came up. I will also say in real world, I have I work with Europe a lot. I also have my counterpart is in the UK. GDPR comes up all the time in real world. So like every week I talk about GDPR in general. So that is
While we
but
have you,
that's a law, and make sure, yeah, you got to make sure
yeah, this is
that
what
you're
you
in
must
compliance.
do. And let's pause for a second. While the test might focus on just GDPR, or it seemed that it does, but it's just a general privacy rule that we really have. So I mentioned it earlier why we want to do crypto shredding, because in GDPR, for instance, we have the right to be forgotten. But I don't even trust that the people in the hotel are cleaning the room that way. I'm coming in there with my own, clean wipes, disinfectant wipes. I don't, it's not, I just don't trust their cleanliness. I wash that vegetable, even if it said organic, no things, I'm washing it before I put it in there. So,
Yeah.
the right to be forgotten is important. It's one of the very testable GDPR rules. And all these rules basically say you are notified. By the way, we're collecting your personal information. You have the right to go, no, you ain't. I'm opting out. That opt
Yeah.
out is a very testable thing. But when they notify you, maybe you don't want to opt out. I want to know why you're collecting it. They must tell you. We use your social security number because we're stupid. We just wanted a unique identifier or whatever. No, we do. We're your doctor and we need this value. We need to know your blood type, And then you have the right to request reviews. Suppose the doctor got your blood type wrong. Through an
Yeah.
accident, he just hit the wrong key. We've all fat fingered. I should be able to go. Can I see what you're doing with my records? I'm sorry, that's not. No, you're not allowed back there. Yes, I am. I'm allowed back there. It's my records, tough guy. And then when you leave that doctor, say, hey, no offense, but we're moving. I'm not going to be using you anymore. I don't do anything wrong, but I need my medical records back. Oh, well, when the guy gets in here, I'll look for that. And then, no, I'm going to erase it now. But that's the right to be forgotten. So again, remember, you get notification, purpose, opt out, right to review, and correct changes, if it's wrong, and the right to be forgotten, whether it's GDPR or anywhere. But that's a great, fantastic thing they did in Europe. And it's a requirement, and all these things are there to kind of show we're pretty good at that. You can trust us to clean
Yeah.
the hotel room. Our kitchen's clean back there.
Can I
Yeah,
just ask?
definitely.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt you, Larry. I just wanted to ask a small question to Kevin. You mentioned about AI tools, which is probably
Yep.
going to be the future. Are these
Correct.
proprietary tools, or is there anything on the open market so that customers don't get locked
Oh, no,
into
these
one
aren't
cloud?
tools. These aren't tools. So far, we haven't talked about a tool. This is the test, just like you getting your CISSP.
Yes,
These are just letters that they could put on the resume. We haven't
right.
seen what you can do yet. No,
Oh,
these aren't
okay.
tools. You don't click on FedRAMP and start moving.
No,
Like,
yeah.
yeah,
Right.
they're just
Right.
Yeah, they're not
certifications.
like, yeah, there's a lot that goes into these,
This is the doctor behind his desk, and he's got all his certificates on the wall. This is all their doctor certificates that they earned.
Yeah,
Got it?
but this ties back into that trust in the cloud. So that came up earlier, like how can you, as you move workloads to the cloud? I would say the cloud, because it's been around, for a bit now and it's proven. I again, I'm just kind of going back, started working in the cloud like 2007, 2008, like very early days when really no one trusted the cloud, and you really had to make that point on here's what we do. It's still important, right? Security is top priority within the cloud. But I think now with the amount of workloads, I mean, if you like the Nasdaq, I could go on and on about the customers. I think I have a slide that talks about some of the different customers. But with that said, I think people now understand they can trust the cloud, but then having these controls really help you in two ways. One, because in this case, right, us as AWS are compliant and these controls, it doesn't automatically mean you as the customer are automatically have ISO 27001, but it definitely helps because all those questions about the data center, right, you're already taking care of that part because us as a cloud provider are ISO 27001. Then you just have to prove the different parts of any of these compliances
And it goes back
at
to the
your
cloud
workload.
responsibility model.
Yeah,
So you
exactly.
can look at your
That's
cloud
more in.
responsibility model. You go, for all this stuff, we know we're covered, but all the stuff that's inside, we still got to look at that. You can't blame Amazon for that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a question we get a lot. Is like, oh, if we use AWS, are we going to be ISO 27001? Not necessarily. You're not going to just automatically have that, but it's going to help you a big part of the way as you go through your own as a company, right, compliance or whatever one. that's listed or that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, you know what
And
I was
that,
thinking of, Lewis? Actually, imagine for me, as I'm thinking of when you got sick, put that back. Let me bring those certifications back.
yeah.
Go
Oh
break
wait,
that pen.
hold
Yeah.
on. Sorry. One more back.
All
Yep,
right.
there we go.
Grandmom always made the best chicken soup. That's who I eat. That's my internal staff, but she's getting old. And I need some good chicken soup. My wife's Chinese. She doesn't make Jewish chicken soup, matzo ball soup. So I find these restaurants, and how do I trust? Yeah, I know it says, Goldberg's chicken soup, but what else can you prove? And you go, look at all this stuff. Or look, and actually, I
Yeah.
was thinking, maybe it's your doctor, because that's what I took for medication. But grandma's getting old, and you're saying you can heal me? My grandma's medication always healed me. You go to your doctor, and he looks behind his wall, and he's got all these. I graduated from MIT. I did all this. Can you not trust me to maybe handle your health as well as your grandma? I don't know. I haven't tasted your soup.
Yeah. Yep. And these are just some. I mean, if you go to like, if you Google AWS compliance, there's a lot. So, and these are constantly being renewed, by the way. So it's not just like one time and then you're done with it. These need to be recertified. So the
Not
same
unlike,
controls are in
Lewis, what we
place.
saw in the common criteria for our equipment. For our equipment, we could just say, "Oh, you're using whatever a Cisco blah 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 blah. Is it certified?" And you go to the common criteria and you go, "Here's the certificate. That's why I can trust it." Well, this is why you would trust AWS, because these are the many certificates they've gained. All right, I'm sorry, we've said enough.
Yep.
Keep going.
No, no, yeah, it's good. So just letting you know, there's like if you're working with any kind of we have like a lots of partners. So again, if you're using it on premise, I think that came up. If you have some kind of tool you like, chances are it's going to be in AWS. You can bring those tools to the cloud, or you can work with whoever you have on premises, and then also in the cloud. It may be also a hybrid type of situation. And then, yeah, just kind of going back into all different customers. I won't read these. Um, and then, so I won't go through each of the controls, but you can see here at the high level, whether you're dealing with identity or access management, detective controls, any kind of infrastructure protection, data protection, incident response, and compliance. And these are the various services that we offer that will allow you
And
to
yeah,
have that
that
high
so
level.
dude, man, I'm looking at the both sides, the detective and seeing the overlap, and I want to know more about Amazon Detective. Uh,
Yeah.
what do you do there? Are you got you yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So detective, so you had some kind of incident or potential incident or something that you want to look into, and detective will allow you to say you had this instance, maybe this storage, and you can dive deep into basically do like an investigation within the cloud, and it will show up in detective that works with other tools like Security Hub as an example
Yeah, that's the,
for
that's the easy
detective
part. That's
controls.
the easy part. I want to see you do it
Yep.
on the response side. I want to see how detective responds. I'm sorry.
Well, no, there. I mean, there's different. Like I think in the case of you respond like something is found, right? Now, are you talking about it? There's you could send it to the SOC that could use detective, right? Amazon Detective to look at it on the detective side, but then there is things like I was mentioning earlier. One that comes to mind is config. I don't know exactly where it's. Let me see where it's listed under. But anyway,
Kevin's way more professional than I am. See how polished he's
yeah,
trying to be and assume that
yeah,
the user doesn't, and I appreciate that. But I want to cut because we have limited time, and I know you're brilliant.
yeah.
And you know AI and you know blockchain and all this stuff. So, what are some of the coolest things you could summarize that Response is kind of working on, if not released yet to the in the wild?
I can't talk like because there's not everyone's under NDA, but what I will say like today, like config can say if there's an anomaly within, let's just say an instance, it's probably the easiest thing, could be containers. You can if it's not compliant, so you have different rules, it knows what it should be. It can go in there and auto remediate. So it could say you could isolate that instance if there was like suspicious activity. You can alert, and this is all done in an
And I'm sure
automated
for
fashion.
this, it's not in a vacuum. You're pulling in data sources already. Like we're manually going to the National Vulnerability Database. You've got
Oh yeah,
APIs that are feeding into that at all times, and live detection, like the Storm Center that's feeding into you. So it's not like you're just doing this. Go, oh, I noticed this on your machine. You're like, dude, the world's going through something right now. I looked at the weather report, and you're about to get hit with a rainstorm, and I could see there's water in your thing. It's not a normal leak. That's part of the rainstorm.
yeah. I mean, definitely. So these are specific that you as a customer can deploy. If you think about, we'll step back and think about AWS. By using AWS, we have what we call Shield. I think that's really what you're getting at, Larry. And
The
what we
threat
do is,
intelligence gathering.
yes,
Yeah.
correct. We have threat intelligence gathering, so we'll block like any kind of reputation IP. And what I mean by that is like any IP that's like a known malicious IP, we block against known bots. And this is all done as you get this for free just using AWS. And we have threat intelligence happening that we know the bad actors out there, and we pull it from different
Live
places.
feeds, the
Yeah,
MITRE database and all kinds of
correct.
internet, like I said, the Internet Storm Center.
Yeah, and then we have the vulnerability database, which is another service called Inspector, which is actually down here as an example. So we pull from multiple like MITRE, this vulnerability database. I mean, I could spend, and I do, like part of my daily job is to really dive deep into these services on what we use for general threat intelligence. Again, like bot control, and this is all happening every day in real time. But when you use AWS as a whole, there's what we call Shield, which is under infrastructure protection. And there are various services that use threat intelligence, but that's probably the one that comes up all the time. So we'll block against like a DDoS attacker if we know like a bad DDoS. If we know there's like any kind of bad actors out there, we pull from various sources into our threat intelligence within AWS.
Awesome. Yeah, that's what I figured. And he could only say so much. So
Yeah,
later on, when
yeah,
I'll try to pick your
yeah.
brain. But I'm sure with the AIs and Amazon Q, if you've learned any more about Q since we last talked.
Yeah, I mean, Q, right? It's like enabled if anyone uses AWS, you see Q. Again, it uses AI in the background. We got 10 minutes here. You want me to jump into the AI? I do have some slides on AI. So there's just partners and solutions again. Yeah, you want me, maybe it's a good segue into, what is generative AI and the different models. So this is, I took some, we have a whole topic on generative AI and security, but I just took some of it for this. Figured I'd talk about security compliance, tie it back into the CISSP. But generative AI does come up every day for us, and then also in the context of security. I'm sure you definitely heard about it in general in the news, etc. But we do have a lot of our customers
All my
asking
graphics are
specifically.
generated. All my graphics are now generated from DALL-E via ChatGPT of Spock and my wife making fun of me.
There you go.
She's
Yeah.
Kirk now, dude. She once in a while I'll show Kirk, but usually she's the captain in my things.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about the foundational models. You mentioned Claude, right, which is by Anthropic, who we partnered with. But then you have Bard, you have Chat GPT. These images are I don't know exactly. It's not, I didn't come up with these graphics, but they are generative AI. That's why they're down here. So they were generated from that. Right. I like the dog with the hat because I like dogs, but that's just me. And so, right, you can have stories, images, videos. If anyone used any of the generative AI, you'll know what I'm talking about there. And so we have come up with what, and this is specifically from actually my team within AWS. There's a blog out there from my manager about the generative AI scoping matrix. And so you have like a mental model. I'll kind of go through this quickly just because of time. But you have the consumer apps, right? So these are things today like
I'm sorry. Are you in
ChatGPT
a
and
rush?
Midjourney.
Are you in a rush? Because I'm not
I,
really. Yeah.
I
Okay.
am.
All
Sorry.
right. I figured
I
as
do have.
much. All
Yeah,
right.
I have
Just
a two
saying.
thirty. Yeah, yeah. I got 8 minutes now, but yeah, yeah. I'm happy to come back. We just have to schedule it. Maybe I think
Anytime.
tomorrow's Friday though. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, next time. Yeah, we can have more. But really, with the scope at enterprises, it starts with the consumer app, right? ChatGPT came out a little bit over a year ago, and it got a lot of buzz for good reason, right? And people start to use it as like the consumer app, if you will. Then, as we're seeing now, you move more into the enterprise app. So you have Salesforce Einstein. We have our Amazon Code Whisperer, which is super cool as far as Gen AI. It can show you that if you have insecure code as you're coding, so if you're using like an IDE, or it can give you suggestions on how to write better code. So I use it all the time, and it really, I will say that just because I work for AWS, but Code Whisperer is super cool because it really enhances, if you will, both writing secure code and then just getting the code that you want quicker, so that you can generate more code and better code in general, and it
And in
just
terms
speeds
of
up the process.
accuracy, there was a dig. I think it was on ChatGPT this week that it was about 48% accurate in code. So
Really? Yeah, yeah. But
yeah,
you
it
still have to
wasn't
look at it.
100%.
That right, right. I mean, you still have to look at the code. We did internally those who use code whisper or not, and there was like I forget the percentage to be honest, but it was a pretty high percentage more efficient code using code whisper because it will still generate that code. Of course, you still have to look at it, test the code. I mean, it doesn't take the fundamentals away from development, but it definitely will enhance it as part of it. So today, we're definitely in scope 1 and 2. I'll say more, but there's 5. So as we go more, you have the pre-trained model, so you can build your own app. And recently released is Amazon Bedrock, which you can think of it as like the platform, the foundation, and then it uses these foundation models. There's various models like Claude that you mentioned, Larry. There's also we have our own within Amazon called Titan. And so you take the models, those pre-trained models that you probably have heard about with Gen AI, and then you use Bedrock to build those base models and then to call on them. So these 3 scopes, we're definitely getting more into the pre-trained model now. Consumer app definitely being used. Enterprise apps, you see a lot of companies every day coming out with different apps. You probably see, I even saw Salesforce now even has commercials talking about Gen AI with I think it's Matthew
Okay, so
McConaughey.
I'm gonna put my neck out there and be the fool. I gotta admit, it's with Bedrock and having your own models. Am I right in saying
Yeah,
that when you're using a pre-trained model, let's say it's an HR database, it's going to have a bunch of your average HR and it's going to do analytics on the average person that it knows. But if I
yeah,
build my own model, I don't, I can, I might use them for some law of average, but I want a separate category that's my people and do analysis on patterns in my identity and access management system or something like that.
yeah,
Can I
yeah,
do that?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. With that's the thing with Bedrock. And this probably is a differentiator versus others. I'm just saying for one thing that what Bedrock kept in mind is it's your data. You control it, so you can put like access control on who can see what data via Bedrock.
But
So
also, I want the training data. So I don't want the
yeah,
average pattern of employees around the world. I want to know what's the average pattern of my employees. You know what I mean? In various
yeah,
things.
you can get specific within your data, like on your pre-trained model.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But you still have to use those foundational models, or if you have another one, uh, there's a list of them if you were to use Bedrock on what you can use. And I think what you're getting more into is like and I'll go into this prompt engineering. So like how you engineer your data and then what results that is both to your compliance as a company. I'll go more into it. I got a couple minutes here. So again, I think you're talking about more scope 4, where
Oh,
you're fine tuning your model
yeah.
to
Never
exactly what
mind.
you
I
want.
should have waited
Yeah,
for you. Never mind.
yeah. No, and so this definitely 1 through 3 is being used today, like pre-trained models, like you mentioned Claude, right? You pull that down, you're using that model, but then you can fine tune your model based on your data. So that's exactly what you're saying. That HR data that's specific to your data. And again, Bedrock SageMaker is uh, you can have jump starts to use like AI ML underneath, and like these playbooks with SageMaker
And
for
those
the models
playbooks are
themselves.
exactly the term we use, and I'm sure it's used everywhere, but in particularly in the source systems. That's the part that we're having, or and we're afraid the
Correct.
playbooks aren't good enough yet. And we don't want to break
Correct.
stuff. Yeah.
That's SageMaker exactly. The SOAR playbook or the SOAR, and then models being built around SageMaker. Yeah, actually, we can talk more about that because there's things now that are released around that correct. That's say moving towards the future things around that definitely. And then scope 5, again, kind of going back in the SageMaker, train the model from scratch, but this could be expensive, right? Because you have to train the models. This is where you hear about using like ChatGPT cost X amount of dollars per day. That this is because it's training the models themselves.
I see.
So
While that's powerful, the vulnerability that just stands out right away that companies, well-meaning companies, are going to fall victim to is the concept
correct.
of it takes 1 billion samples. And if you have 100 employees and you try to self-train it and look for, is he stealing? You are probably going to bias somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, so scope 5 is definitely you also have to have that expertise. So typically what we see today is 1 through 3. You're starting to see a little bit of 4, right? Like fine-tune models based on your data, right? And then scope 5 is like the self-train, but the scope 4 and 5 will cost money because you're also using those GPUs. You have to use compute
Oh my
to
gosh,
um
sure, sure,
to do
sure.
this.
It's almost like raw compute. It's the lowest
Yeah.
level of the architecture. It's like the total infrastructure of the service of it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Everything else is kind of a platform. Yeah.
Yep. Um, yeah, so again, kind of tying it back in, right? You have the governance compliance around this, legal privacy, risk management, controls, and resiliency across all these scopes. Because you still have to secure generative AI.
And
And this
yeah,
this is where things are going, right? Like just the security in Gen AI, just you do infrastructure, things we talked about, the cloud, the same thing now within the models of Gen AI.
yeah, actually, I can see the flow go back. It's a great flow. That's a great graphic. So scope one is
Yeah,
classic SaaS. 2, 3, and 4
yeah,
are like PaaS, and the other
yeah.
one is infrastructure, really.
Yeah, if you want to, yep, you could definitely equate that. Correct. Yep. It's like SaaS, like you just use the app, you just go in the chat GPT. It's just there, it gives you the result.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
enterprise app, yeah, yep, yeah, cool. Um, yeah, I do have to drop, but here's just different data flows. I'm happy I can show this deck. But you prompt engineer, and if you heard that term, you go into the Gen AI app, right? 1, 2. You have plugins in the query. So whatever the customer data, that HR data that you talked about, it comes back with a response. You get some various context, fine tune the model, right? Or the data itself. You have that pre-trained model like a Claude or a Bard, what have you. You're training the data, and then it does completion, and then it gives the end user the response. So it's just a quick data flow within how Gen AI operates. Here's talking again in the context of securing generative AI, right? You don't want to outright ban generative AI technologies. You hear some companies doing that, but Gen AI, AI is here. It's not going to go away. I know things are talked about in the media, but they are here. So that's not really the best practice. You want to enable your organization, but then you do want to empower users. You have them create um, any kind of existing data policies could still pertain to Gen AI. you want to do threat models, track versions, and then implement controls, any kind of incorrect information.
Was that supposed to be Bill or Bill? Bill. That, oh, I'm sorry, Bill.
Yeah, like an SBOM. So like so I actually heard a different. So if you think of like an SBOM, like if you do a vulnerability, see what's in that model. Like I deal with SBOMs a lot when we think about like applications. What is all the components that make up an application? So is this version of Python out of date? So you do an SBOM and then make sure that there's no vulnerabilities in Python 2.7
Since
as
they're
an
a customer of
example.
yours, and we're all currently using them, how about
Yeah.
Zoom as an example?
As far as like what as an
What?
example of
Yeah,
like
of an SBOM. Look at all the stuff component for an SBOM
yeah,
for
yeah.
Zoom.
Right. So Zoom's running on the cloud. You can run an SBOM, right? What are they using? What version of like Linux? I don't know this to be true. I'm just saying if you were look at them like the version of Linux, is it
They're
up to
using
date?
yours.
Right.
They're using
Software development
AWS's
toast.
version of Lizard.
Yeah.
They use it. They use your
Yeah.
AWS
Yeah.
version that allows them to contain stuff, and they're just running in a container in a big AWS thing.
Yeah, yeah. So you could run it against that platform and then get a software bill of materials, which is becoming more and more with compliance. So like our service, I'll just get more specific to wrap it up here, is like Inspector. We'll do like an SBOM. So when it runs that scan on whatever instance, it will provide you an SBOM as part of that vulnerability scan, as an example. That way you have that, you can say on this date, again, this kind of ties back into compliance. On this date, here was all the software that made up X, and it was these versions, they were up to date. So if you had any kind of incident, you could say, well, we were up to date here, let's look at somewhere else, as an example. That would be, more real world. Yeah.
I don't want to keep you. I know you're going to click, but just thank you a
Yeah.
million times.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Here's like general security. If you type in compliance, if you're interested in that, if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter. I am, or X now, sorry, formerly. I hate when they say formerly and then it's Twitter now. I feel like it's out. But anyway, on X, feel free to follow me. I'm not like super active, but I do check it. I know Larry, you and I talked on there. So but I do check it, and feel free to add me. And then my LinkedIn is just KM Boland. Feel free to add me there too, or follow up with any questions. Larry, if you have any follow-up questions, just feel free to ask me. I will try to reply by. I guess your class is up to tomorrow, right? So I will. Let me know if there's any questions. I'll try to reply by tomorrow. I should be able to.
I was supposed to go the other hand. I'm left-handed, so thank you very much, Kevin. You're amazing. Amazing.
Oh yeah. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. It was very informative, very useful.
I kind of cut him short there, but he asked that question that led you down the compliance. How do I trust you? And Lewis is in a lot of my classes, so I want to thank him for that question. Thank you so much.
No, it's a great question. I know I had that slide, so you're saying. I mean, it also comes up all the time. So
yeah, it's just like, again, it's the doctor with the certificates on his wall. You want me to trust me with your teeth? All right. Thanks again, Kev.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks all. Thanks for having me. Good seeing you, Larry. Bye, everyone.